Stephen is here on set. It means it's time for business. He's starting out with the trial of entrepreneur Elizabeth Holmes, on trial for fraud in California. This is over her medical testing company, Theranos, isn't it?
Yeah, Elizabeth Holmes is accused of misleading patients and investors over claims of a revolutionary technology that could detect health conditions with just a few drops of blood. At its peak, Theranos was valued at more than $9 billion before it imploded in 2015. On the first day of her trial, the prosecution argues that Holmes knew the technology didn't work. She's pleading not guilty to the charges against her. Catherine Viette has more.
Villain or victim? That's the question jurors will have to decide in Elizabeth Holmes' fraud trial. The one-time billionaire is now facing up to 20 years in prison if found guilty. At 19, Holmes founded Theranos, a medical company that aimed to revolutionize blood testing. She claimed her diagnostic devices could detect a range of illnesses using just a few drops of blood from a finger prick. Only problem, the devices didn't work. For the prosecution, the motive is simple.
This is a case about fraud, about lying and cheating to get money.
The prosecution alleges that Holmes knew the devices didn't work and continued to raise funds anyway, some $700 million, defrauding both patients and investors. Holmes is facing charges including fraud and conspiracy to commit fraud. Her lawyers say Holmes was just a naive businesswoman who made mistakes.
Failure is not a crime. Trying your hardest is not a crime. A failed business does not make a CEO a criminal.
At one point, Theranos was worth some $9 billion before the company was dissolved in 2018. It's a case being closely watched in Silicon Valley.
The fact is that this is the first time you have the CEO of a hot technology company possibly going to jail. So what's at stake here is that it will put the fear of God, the fear of government into the hearts of Silicon Valley's most powerful investors.
Holmes has pleaded not guilty and may testify in her defense. The trial is expected to last around 3 months.
Now, more from the US. The country's finance minister warning that the government risks hitting its borrowing limit next month.
Janet Yellen has written to congressional leaders to tell them that it was most likely the US government would run out of money in October. She wants politicians to approve an increase in the government's borrowing limit. Now, that's a routine procedure for Congress, but often becomes a heated political battle, with Republicans often resisting raising it. In her letter, Yellen says that waiting until the last minute could harm business and consumer confidence and lead to an increase in US borrowing costs at a delicate time for the economy. Well, let's take a look at what's happening on the markets next for you. European shares starting the day firmly in the red. We've got fairly significant falls across London, Paris and Frankfurt. Shares in the airline EasyJet have tumbled by almost 14% at the open after the company announced it had rejected an unsolicited offer from an unnamed bidder, a takeover offer. Lots of speculation around today about who that bidder exactly might be. More broadly, investors are looking ahead to the European Central Bank meeting later and whether or not it might start winding down some of its pandemic-related stimulus. Asian markets are also trading mostly in the red earlier. Shanghai, the only major market there, showing some green today.
Another pandemic story now, because the oil company Shell is considering forcing workers to get vaccinated for COVID-19.
An internal memo seen by the Financial Times discusses a potential vaccine mandate for staff living and working on offshore rigs or other remote locations. That obligation, the memo says, could be extended to all staff over time. Those who refuse to comply could be fired. Now, the oil companies Hess and Chevron have already told workers at offshore rigs that they will need to be vaccinated, while the investment bank Goldman Sachs will require proof of vaccination from next month.
This next story is a really bugbear of mine, so I'm glad you're highlighting it, Stephen. Lawmakers in California are trying to ban a common symbol that causes confusion about recycling. It always confuses me.
This is the chasing arrows symbol. It's the 3 green arrows in the form of a triangle. State lawmakers in California have voted to bin it because they say it's misleading and leads to tons of rubbish being incorrectly disposed of. The symbol can be used on any product, even if local collection facilities can't actually recycle the material. So the State Assembly has voted to ban firms from using the symbol until there's evidence that it meets California's recycling standards. That bill now goes to the Senate for further vote.
Yeah, it is confusing. Thank you very much, Stephen Carroll, clearing it all up for us on France 24.